When Noah moved back home after years of military service, he did not expect anything special. He was not the kind of person who needed attention or praise. He just wanted a quiet life, a place where he could breathe again, maybe a chance to understand what peace felt like after so long. His new neighborhood seemed like the right place. Clean streets, trimmed lawns, families walking their dogs in the evenings, and a silence that felt almost too gentle compared to the noise he had known before. His house sat at the end of the street, slightly away from the main entrance of the neighborhood. The first morning after he moved in, he woke up early out of habit. Even though he was no longer in the field, his mind still believed mornings began before the sun. He made coffee, stepped outside, and watched the sky brighten while wearing the same light camo jacket he had worn for years. It wasn't anything official, just a comfortable piece of clothing he had kept. It felt familiar, almost like a part of him. He didn't wear it to show off anything. He just wasn't used to thinking about clothes the way civilians did. As he stood there, sipping coffee and listening to the quiet breeze, he noticed a few neighbors walking past. They gave polite smiles, and he nodded back. Some looked curious, maybe trying to figure out what kind of person he was, but no one seemed unfriendly. For the first time in a while, Noah felt like he might actually fit in somewhere, but peace rarely lasts without interruption. Around 10 in the morning, a woman marched toward his driveway. She looked like someone who ran everything straight posture. Arms stiff at her sides, a clipboard tucked under one arm, even though it was just a regular weekday. Her expression carried the kind of importance people give themselves when they think the world should operate according to their rulebook. "Good morning," she said. But her tone had no warmth. Noah set down his mug politely. "Morning. I'm the president of the HOA," she continued. "My name is Leela, and I manage the standards of this community." Her eyes scanned him the way someone checks for dust on furniture. Noah didn't pay much attention. He was used to people inspecting him for reasons he didn't always understand. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, though she said it like an obligation rather than a greeting. "I also wanted to address a clothing matter right away." Noah blinked. "A clothing matter?" "Yes," she said, tapping her clipboard. "We maintain a certain appearance in this community. Clothing that could be considered intimidating, disruptive, or unsightly isn't allowed outdoors. So I'll need you to remove that camo jacket when outside your home." For a moment, Noah thought she was joking. The neighborhood was full of people wearing everything from jogging outfits to bright floral shirts. His jacket wasn't even formal military gear, it was just camo patterned. Faded at the sleeves, soft from years of wear. "I didn't see anything about that in the guidelines," Noah said calmly. He had read the HOA rules the night he moved in. He liked understanding expectations. "It's under discretionary appearance standards," she said quickly. "I decide what fits the community aesthetic." Noah felt a small knot in his chest, but he didn't want to start a conflict. "I'm not trying to bother anyone. This is just an old jacket. It's old or not," she said. "It doesn't belong in a place like this. We keep things tidy here." He looked at her for a long moment. He had dealt with tougher people, more aggressive people, people who carried far more weight than an HOA title. But somehow this felt more ridiculous than anything he had encountered. A woman policing a jacket? A peaceful morning interrupted because of a pattern? "I'll look at the rules again," he replied. Choosing the calmest route, she nodded with the confidence of someone who believed she had won. "Good. And welcome again." She walked away, and Noah watched her leave, feeling unsure whether to laugh or sigh. He shook his head lightly and went back inside. He tried to brush off the interaction as a strange introduction to neighborhood life. Every community had that one person who treated rules like sacred text. He hoped this was just a one-time moment and not a preview of ongoing trouble. The rest of the day went smoothly. A couple across the street waved at him warmly when he unloaded the last boxes from his truck. A teenager biking past complimented his dog, a gentle shepherd mix named Rusty. Noah spent a few hours settling into the house, unpacking small things, first photos, books, kitchen items. These simple tasks helped slow his thoughts. When he organized the living room shelf, he paused at a framed picture of his old team. He ran a thumb across the glass and felt that familiar mix of pride and distance. Those days were part of him, but also behind him, or at least he hoped so. In the afternoon, he put a leash on Rusty and headed out for a walk. He didn't even think about his jacket this time. It was just instinct to put it on when stepping outside. The air was cool and the fabric was comfortable. As he walked along the sidewalk, Rusty wagged his tail at anyone passing by. Most neighbors greeted him with smiles. Noah felt at ease again, letting the simplicity of the moment wash over him, until he turned the corner and saw her again. Lila stood near the community bulletin board, talking to another neighbor. Her eyes locked onto Noah the moment she spotted the jacket. She stopped mid-sentence, straightened her posture, and walked toward him with the same stiff steps as earlier. "Noah," she said, her voice sharp. "Hi again," he answered politely. "I thought we talked about the jacket." He looked down at it as if noticing it for the first time. "It's chilly. And it's just a jacket. It's not appropriate," she insisted. "You're walking around dressed like you're in some kind of operation. People might feel threatened. This is a peaceful community." Rusty leaned closer to Noah, sensing tension. "I'm not threatening anyone," Noah replied gently. "I'm just taking my dog out." "That jacket does not belong here," she repeated. "I'm asking you to take it off. Now." Other neighbors nearby had started watching, not openly staring, but stealing glances from the corner of their eyes. Noah hated being the center of attention. All he wanted was a peaceful walk. "I think you're overreacting," he said carefully, keeping his tone neutral. "There's nothing wrong with it." Lila pressed her lips tightly. "If you refuse, I'll have to file a formal violation. The community depends on order, and I enforce that." Noah took a slow breath. He had learned to choose his battles, and this one felt too trivial to turn into an argument. But he also didn't want to feed someone's need for control. He looked at her clipboard again, wondering how many times she'd used it to intimidate people. "I'm not taking it off," he said simply. "I'm just walking my dog." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she wasn't used to someone telling her no. "You'll regret ignoring the rules," she snapped. Before turning and walking away quickly, Noah didn't answer. He didn't even feel angry. Mostly, he felt tired. Tired that something as small as clothing could be turned into a conflict. Tired that someone could try to dictate a person's life over something so harmless. He walked on, letting Rusty lead the way. The neighborhood still looked peaceful, but now it felt different. The silence carried a slight edge, like a reminder that even the calmest places had their own kind of noise. That night, he sat on his porch and watched the sky darken. He tried not to think about Lila or her rules. He had handled far worse things, and this was just an annoyance, nothing more. But a small thought kept poking at him. If this was only day one, what else might she try? He didn't want trouble. He really didn't, but trouble, he knew, often had a way of finding people who didn't ask for it. For now, though Noah breathed in the cool night air, petted Rusty's head and reminded himself that he had survived much harder days. Whatever came next, he would handle it with calm and patience. He just hoped that neighborhood peace he wanted so much wouldn't turn into something he had to defend. Noah tried to believe the first argument with Lila was just an odd misunderstanding. Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe she misunderstood him. Maybe she was simply too strict with rules. He wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. After all, he had just moved in, and starting life in a new place meant adjusting to different personalities. He hoped things would settle down once people got used to him. But the next morning, when he stepped outside to get his mail, he found the first sign that things were not as simple as he hoped. A bright yellow envelope sat in his mailbox, labeled HOA Notice. Inside was a letter saying he had violated the community's visual harmony rule. It didn't mention camo clothing directly, but it said he had worn unapproved attire that disrupts neighborhood uniformity. Noah read it twice. He remembered reading every line of the HOA rules the day he moved in, and he was certain nothing like this was there. The letter felt strangely vague, as if it had been written just to make something sound official. He sighed and folded the paper. Rusty nudged his legs softly, sensing a change in his mood. "It's okay, buddy," Noah murmured, rubbing the dog's head. "We'll just ignore it. Maybe she'll calm down." But deep down, he sensed that wasn't going to happen. Later that day, he drove to the local grocery store. When he returned, he found another small notice taped to his front door. This time, about vehicle parking alignment. It said his truck was parked slightly angled and needed to be corrected immediately. He walked around to look. His truck was parked normally, exactly inside the lines. No different from any other vehicle on the street, it didn't take long for him to understand what was happening. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. Noah didn't like conflict. In the military, he had seen enough of that to last a lifetime. Now, all he wanted was peace. But peace became harder when someone worked so hard to disturb it. Later that afternoon, as he worked on unpacking more boxes in his living room, he heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, an elderly neighbor stood there with a worried look. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Alina. I live 3 houses down. I just wanted to say, don't take those notices too seriously." Noah blinked. "You know about them already?" She gave a small, tired sigh. "Everyone does. Lila keeps close watch on newcomers. She likes things done her way." "I see," Noah said, though he felt strange hearing it from someone else. "She's been doing this for years," Elena continued. "Most people just give in because they don't want the trouble." Noah gave her a polite smile. "Thank you. I appreciate you letting me know." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Don't let her push you around." "You seem like a good person," he nodded. "I'm trying." After she left, he stood for a while staring at the door. He had hoped the situation was just a misunderstanding. But now, it was clear it wasn't, and even stranger. It seemed the rest of the neighborhood had been dealing with Lila's behavior long before he arrived. The next 2 days brought more notices. One accused him of leaving his trash bins out for too long, even though he took them in the same day as everyone else. Another warned him about yard maintenance, even though his lawn was freshly cut and cleaner than most. Each notice felt more like a test than a real problem. Noah kept calm. He threw the notices into a drawer and told himself he wouldn't let something so small get under his skin. But as they piled up, a quiet frustration started building inside him. He had faced time, distance, fear, and hardship far away from home, and he had survived every bit of it. Yet now, a single person with a clipboard was trying to disturb the little peace he had come home to enjoy. The breaking point came on the 3rd morning. Noah took Rusty out for a walk. It was still early, the sun barely up. He wasn't even wearing the camo jacket, just a plain gray hoodie. He hoped maybe avoiding the jacket would avoid more trouble. But halfway down the street, heard hurried footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Lila walking stiffly toward him, her expression sharp and determined. The clipboard was tucked under her arm again, like always. "Noah," she called out, as if she had been searching for him. He stopped, but stayed calm. "Good morning. We need to discuss your ongoing violations." He didn't react right away. "Violations?" "Yes," she said, flipping through her papers. "Several, in fact. Trash, parking, attire, my attire?" He cut in gently. "I'm just wearing a hoodie. It's not about today," she said quickly. "It's about ongoing behavior." "Behavior." Noah repeated, confused. "I'm just living here. I'm not causing trouble." She raised her chin slightly. "You are refusing to follow community standards." He wanted to ask which standards, but he realized she probably didn't know herself. She just knew she wanted control. Then she said something that made him pause. "As long as I am president," she declared, "I decide what belongs here and what doesn't." Rusty gave a low, confused whine, sensing tension. Noah took a slow breath. "I'm not trying to cause conflict. I'm just trying to live quietly." "Then follow the rules," she snapped. "Starting with this." She pulled out a fresh notice and held it out to him. "This is your final warning about clothing that creates discomfort among neighbors." He didn't take the paper. "Who said they're uncomfortable?" "It's my responsibility to speak for the community," she replied quickly. "I've talked to some of the neighbors," Noah said calmly. "They seem fine with me." "That's because they don't want confrontation," she argued. "People rely on me to maintain order." He looked at her for a long moment. He realized then that she wasn't acting out of fear or misunderstanding. She acted out of a belief that she was right no matter what. Anything that didn't fit her idea of the neighborhood was a problem. "I'm not removing my jacket," he said quietly. "Not now, not later. It's not hurting anyone." Her expression hardened. "Then I'll be forced to take further action." He didn't respond. He simply turned and continued walking, letting Rusty lead him. Leela stood there, stunned that someone had walked away from her authority. When he returned to his house, he felt heavier than before. Not angry, just tired. He sat on his porch with Rusty lying at his feet, watching people walk by. A few neighbors gave him sympathetic looks. One man across the street even gave him a small thumbs up, as if silently supporting him. Hours later, another notice appeared on his door. This one was longer, filled with big official words that didn't really say anything meaningful. It accused him of non-compliance, disruption, and failure to acknowledge community standards. He read the paper, then set it down on the table, rubbing his temples as Rusty placed his head on Noah's lap. "I didn't come here to fight," Noah whispered. He had lived through things he didn't share with anyone. He had lost friends, traveled to places many people couldn't even imagine, spent long nights wondering if he would ever see home again. When he finally did, he wanted it to feel like a safe place. But home didn't feel safe when someone tried to control his every move. That night, as the air grew cooler and the streets quieted, Noah sat outside again, thinking. He wasn't the kind of person who liked involving others in his problems. But he knew one thing very well. Pressure always built until something gave. He couldn't keep letting her push him with false accusations. But he didn't want to escalate the conflict either. Rusty nudged his arm again, trying to comfort him. "No battles," Noah whispered softly. "Not here." But the universe doesn't always listen to quiet wishes. Because across the neighborhood, in her brightly lit living room, Lila was typing an email to the entire HOA board. She labeled it Urgent Concern. Potential threat in the community. She wrote paragraphs about unsettling behavior, military clothing, and resistance to authority. She exaggerated every detail, turning harmless actions into dramatic warnings. She even claimed some neighbors felt unsafe, though she never asked anyone. When she finished, she hit send with a proud smile, certain she was protecting the community. But what she didn't know was that her message would travel far beyond the board. Within a day, someone connected to Noah's past would hear about it, someone who cared deeply about him, someone who didn't take kindly to seeing him disrespected. And while Noah sat quietly on his porch trying to avoid trouble, trouble was already heading his way, not the kind he feared, but the kind that came in the form of loyalty, friendship, and people who refused to let him be treated unfairly. Part 2 closed with a calm neighborhood night. But beneath the calm, something new had begun moving. Something Leela had no idea she had awakened. The next morning started like any other. Sky was soft gray, the kind that promised a calm day. Noah woke up early as usual, made himself coffee, and sat quietly on his porch while Rusty curled at his feet. He tried once again to shake off the weight he had been carrying for the past few days. He wanted to feel like this neighborhood could still be home. But even as he sipped his coffee, he had a feeling something was building, something he didn't fully understand yet. His phone buzzed beside him. The caller ID made him freeze for a second. It was an old friend he hadn't spoken to in a long time, someone from a part of his life he rarely revisited. He answered quietly. "Hey!" A familiar voice came through, warm but alert. "You good, man? Got a strange message last night." Noah straightened slightly. "Message?" "Yeah, something about your HOA, thinking you're a problem." Someone forwarded a copy to our old group chat. Noah closed his eyes. He already knew who had sent it. "Look, I'm fine," he said softly. "Just a misunderstanding. Don't worry about it." His friend didn't seem convinced. "You sure?" "We don't like hearing people mess with you. It's nothing," Noah insisted. "Just someone being strict." There was a long pause, the kind that only happened between people who had known each other for years. "All right," his friend finally said. "But if you need anything, you let us know. We've got your back." Noah gave a half smile. "I know, thanks." When the call ended, he sat still for a moment, staring at the quiet street. I had hoped his past would stay separate from his new life. Not because he wanted to hide it, but because he just wanted a fresh start. He didn't want people looking at him differently. He didn't want neighbors treating him like a symbol instead of a person. He just wanted peace. Later that morning, he took Rusty for another walk around the block. He wasn't wearing the camo jacket, only a brown sweater, and he hoped maybe today would pass without any conflict. As he walked, he noticed something different. Some neighbors who usually gave quick waves now slowed down for longer glances. A few came over to say hello, introducing themselves gently. One man, carrying a garden hose, approached him with a friendly smile. "You settling in all right?" he asked. "I'm trying," Noah said with a small laugh. "I heard some chatter about that jacket thing." The man continued softly. "Don't let it get to you. Most of us don't care what anyone wears." "Thank you," Noah said, relieved to hear it. He walked away feeling a little lighter. Maybe the whole thing really was blown out of proportion by just one person. But that small hope didn't last long. By the afternoon, another bright envelope appeared on his door, this time marked "Escalated Violation Notice." The wording was more dramatic, claiming he refused corrective action and that his behaviors may require intervention. Intervention? Noah read the letter slowly, shaking his head. He felt more confused than angry. Couldn't understand how a simple jacket had turned into a list of accusations. He sat down on his porch bench, resting the letter beside him. Rusty pressed his chin against Noah's leg, as if sensing his frustration. "You're the smart one," Noah muttered gently to the dog. "You don't deal with paperwork." He tried to keep calm, but deep inside, he could feel something shift. A quiet line inside him was being pushed too far. While he sat there trying to clear his head, he heard a car pull up in front of his house. It wasn't loud or flashy, as a simple black SUV. The door opened, and a tall figure stepped out. Noah blinked. He knew that Walkett was another old teammate, someone he hadn't seen in years. He stood up slowly as the man approached with a relaxed grin. "Well," the man said, "looks like I beat the others." Noah let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "You shouldn't have come." "I disagree," the man said calmly. "We heard someone's giving you trouble. We wanted to check on you." "Fine," Noah insisted. The man looked at the stack of HOA notices sitting on the bench. "Doesn't look fine. They're just papers," Noah said with a forced smile. His friend shook his head. "You always say that." Before Noah could respond, another car came rolling down the street. Then another, and another. Within minutes, 3 more vehicles were parked along the curb. Noah stared, stunned. Old teammates, people he once trained with, sweated with, trusted with his life, were now stepping out, stretching their legs, nodding at him with quiet smiles. It wasn't dramatic or loud. They were not wearing uniforms or anything that would draw attention. They just arrived like supportive friends checking in on someone they cared about. He didn't even know what to say. Rusty wagged his tail wildly, excited to see familiar faces. "Noah," one of them said softly, "you didn't think we'd ignore that email, did you?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't want to make this a big thing." "Well, too late," another replied with a grin. "We're here. You don't have to deal with this alone." So they all gathered casually on the porch, sitting on steps, leaning on railings, just like old times. They didn't talk about missions, or their past, or anything tense. They asked about his house, his job plans, his dog, his life. The porch filled with gentle laughter and warm memories, instead of stress. For the first time since he moved in, Noah felt calm. But not everyone felt the same. From across the street, Leela stepped out of her house, stopping mid-stride when she saw the group. Her eyes widened slightly as she counted the unfamiliar faces. She straightened immediately, clutching her clipboard. With both hands, uncertainty flickering across her expression. It was the first time Noah had ever seen her hesitate. She walked quickly toward the group, trying to maintain her usual confidence. "Excuse me?" she said sharply. "Is there a gathering permit?" For she froze when one of the men turned to her politely. "Ma'am," he said with a friendly smile, "we're just visiting a friend. Who are all of you?" she asked, her tone suddenly thinner. "Friends," another replied. "Old friends." She looked at Noah, clearly unsure how to proceed. "You can't have large groups on porches," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "We're not doing anything wrong," Noah said softly. "Just catching up." Leela opened her mouth, closed it, then forced a stiff smile. "Well, Just make sure not to disturb anyone." "We won't," Noah said calmly. She lingered a second longer, clearly uncomfortable, then turned and walked away faster than she came, the moment she disappeared into her house. One of the men let out a quiet laugh. "You weren't kidding," he whispered. "She really does walk like she owns the block." "Yeah," another added. "The clipboard is intense." Noah sighed, but a small smile crept onto his face. "Please don't make this worse." "We're not here to cause trouble," his friend said. "We just want to make sure you're treated fairly." They stayed for a while, chatting gently. Neighbors walked by, curious but not alarmed. Some even waved, relieved to see Noah surrounded by people who respected him as the sun lowered. The group decided to grab dinner together. They invited Noah, but he decided to stay behind and rest. Before leaving, each one gave him a friendly handshake, a pat on the shoulder, or a simple nod that meant more than words ever could. When the last car pulled away, the street became quiet again. Noah sat on his porch, Rusty leaning against him, feeling a mix of emotions: gratitude, relief, a touch of embarrassment, and something else, a renewed sense of strength, not the tough physical kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you aren't alone. But across the street, inside her house, Lila stared through her window, her mind racing. She thought Noah was just a quiet man with a jacket she didn't like. She had no idea. He had people who cared about him so deeply, and she certainly didn't. Expect that those people would return the next day with even more friends. What she started as a simple complaint was slowly turning into something much bigger than she understood, and part 3 ended with the neighborhood quiet, but the tension quietly shifting in Noah's favor. No one in the neighborhood expected anything unusual that morning. The sky was a soft blue, the air was calm, and most people were either leaving for work or getting ready to run errands. It was the kind of peaceful day that usually made Noah grateful to be home again. But this morning felt different. He could feel it even before he stepped outside. Inside his house, he checked the window blinds and watched the street. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he knew something was coming. After everything the HOA had done, after the letters, the warnings, the threats, and Lila trying to embarrass him on the street, he sensed that the situation was getting close to a point where he needed help. Not the kind of help people call for in emergencies, but the kind that came from those who understood him better than anyone else. The brothers who had stood beside him in places where trust meant survival, he hadn't expected them to respond this fast. When he reached out to them the night before, he kept the message short, just a simple explanation of what had been happening. Nothing dramatic, nothing exaggerated. He didn't complain or ask them to confront anyone. He just said he wanted them to visit for a bit and help him settle into civilian life properly. He didn't mention the HOA or the arguments with Lila. But knowing them, they could read between the lines. They always did, so when he woke up early to the sound of engines not loud, just steady and purposeful, he knew who it was before he even saw the vehicles. He stepped outside onto the front porch just as a dark SUV turned the corner, followed by another one behind it. The neighborhood had never seen anything like it. The cars moved slowly, respectfully, not like they were trying to show off or intimidate anyone. But there was something precise about the way they drove. The way they parked near his house, one in front and one farther down the street. It was the look of people who were always aware, always thinking ahead, immediately. A few neighbors peeked out their windows, curious about the unexpected arrival. Some stepped outside with coffee mugs in their hands, whispering quietly as the SUVs came to a stop. Noah didn't smile, but he felt a deep warmth in his chest when the doors opened and familiar faces stepped out. These were the people who had stood with him through long nights, difficult missions, and moments that taught them all what loyalty meant. They weren't just friends, they were family in every way except blood. There was Gray, always calm and steady, with a quiet expression that never changed much no matter the situation. There was Cole, tall and relaxed, carrying the same easy confidence he always had. Then Reed stepped out, closing the door gently as if he was stepping into a peaceful field instead of a suburban street. And behind them, 3 more teammates walked toward Noah's house, all of them wearing normal clothes. Nothing that hinted at their background, except the way they carried themselves. People noticed that part. They couldn't help it. The men looked ordinary, but their posture, their calmness, their awareness of everything around them was something you didn't learn in regular life. Noah took a slow breath and stepped forward. He didn't plan on greeting them with a big show, and they didn't expect one. Their unit had always been simple with greetings, no dramatic reunions, just a nod, a handshake, maybe a brief smile if someone felt generous. Gray was the first to reach him. "You look better than I expected," Gray said quietly, offering a hand. "Feels good to be home," Noah replied. Shaking it, Cole stepped in with a grin that was just barely there. "So this is the famous neighborhood you didn't stop talking about?" Noah gave him a look. "I mentioned it once," Cole said, "and that's enough for us to come check it out." Reed stepped closer, taking in the quiet street, the houses, the trimmed shrubs. "Looks peaceful," he said. "It is," Noah answered. "Most days." The way he said it made the others raise an eyebrow. They didn't push. They never pushed him to talk before he was ready. Instead, they moved around him in an easy, natural circle, greeting him and each other quietly. Anyone watching would see nothing unusual except a group of old friends meeting again. But to anyone who had ever served, it was obvious this was a reunion of people who understood each other with just a glance. Lila, however, did not see it that way. Her voice broke through the morning calm like someone dropping a metal tray in a quiet room. "Excuse me." Everyone turned their heads, not sharply, not rudely, but in the controlled way people did when they were used to observing first before reacting. Lila stood at the end of her driveway, arms crossed tightly, her expression sharp and irritated. She had a folder in her hand, one of her HOA binders, stuffed with papers she used like a shield. The men didn't react. They didn't stiffen or get defensive. They simply watched her with polite curiosity. Lila took a few steps closer, her eyebrows raised as she took in the parked SUVs, the unfamiliar faces, the way they all stood so calmly. To her, it looked like a group gathering without permission. To her, everything was about rules, and this, whatever she thought it was definitely something she needed to control. "Noah," she said in a voice that dripped with the same tone she used every time she felt powerful. "You cannot have guests parking on the street like this. You've already received 2 notices. The HOA has very clear rules. Vehicles must be registered, and gatherings larger than 6 people must be approved ahead of time." Gray blinked slowly. Cole tried not to laugh. Reed simply stared at her with the kind of calm expression that made her more annoyed. Noah kept his voice even. "They're just visiting. They're not blocking anyone." Lila held her binder closer. "That's not the point. Rules are rules. And you also cannot wear camouflage clothing in this neighborhood. You've already been told that." Reed looked down at Noah's jacket, then at Lila with a confusion so subtle it was almost funny. Cole raised an eyebrow as if trying to understand why someone cared about something so small. Gray simply watched her the same way he'd once watched a stray dog bark at a fence patient, but unmoved. Lila stepped closer still. "I'm not trying to be difficult, but we have standards. People move here because they expect order." Noah didn't respond right away. He didn't want to embarrass her, and he didn't want a scene. But before he could speak, Cole took one slow breath and asked gently, "Ma'am, is there a reason a jacket bothers you this much?" Lila stared at him like he had just challenged her authority. "Yes," she said sharply. "Camo is not appropriate for this neighborhood. It sends the wrong message." Gray tilted his head. "What message is that? That this is some kind of military zone?" She snapped. Reed blinked again, slower this time. People across the street had gathered near their driveways now. They didn't want to miss whatever was happening. They weren't whispering loudly, but they were watching, curious, entertained. Almost nervous, Noah felt tension start to build, not in a dangerous way, but in the way that told him he needed to take control before anyone else said something that might escalate the situation. "Lila," he said quietly, "they're just here to visit. They won't be long." She looked at the group again, uncomfortable that none of them looked intimidated or impressed by her authority. "I can't allow this," she said. "Unless they move their vehicles and you remove that jacket, I'll have to issue a citation." Cole mouthed the word citation. To Gray, who almost smiled, Noah stayed calm. We'll handle it. But before Leela could continue, Reed spoke not loudly, not aggressively, just calmly. The same tone he used when asking someone to pass him a tool. Ma'am, he said, we served with him. We're here to check on our friend. Just a short visit, nothing more. The way he said it was simple, but something in his tone made Lila hesitate. It wasn't threatening. It was respectful. But it carried weight. Still, she straightened her shoulders. That doesn't change the rules. Cole folded his arms not intimidatingly, just casually. Does the neighborhood really have a problem with someone wearing a camo jacket? Yes, she answered immediately, and with people crowding the street. Gray exchanged a glance with Noah, silently asking if this kind of thing was normal here. It was. Before Noah could answer, a soft voice came from across the street. Lila, stop. Everyone turned. Mrs. Conway. The older woman who lived 3 houses down walked toward them slowly, holding her morning newspaper under her arm. She wasn't angry, she just looked tired. These men aren't causing trouble, she said, and Noah has been nothing but respectful since he moved in. Let them visit. Leela looked offended. This is not about opinions. This is about rules. Mrs. Conway sighed. It's always about rules with you. More neighbors stepped forward, some nodding along, some watching silently. It was the first time the neighborhood had ever pushed back against Leela's control. It didn't stop her, but it shook her confidence. She pointed at Noah. This isn't over. I'll speak with the HOA board. Expect another notice. Then she turned sharply and walked away. Her binder clutched against her chest like she was afraid it might fall apart. The street stayed quiet until she disappeared into her house. Then Cole let out a slow, mused breath. She's intense, Gray added softly. She's determined, at least. Reed looked at Noah. You okay? Noah nodded. Used to it, Cole shook his head. You shouldn't have to be. The group turned toward his house, ready to head inside. They didn't want to crowd the street or draw more attention. So they moved in a calm, organized way, making it clear they weren't trying to disrupt anything. But the neighbors kept watching, whispering now in a different tone, less concerned, more curious. Some were impressed by Noah's visitors. Others were confused by Lila's behavior. But one thing was clear, the neighborhood was seeing Noah differently now. He wasn't just a quiet guy who kept to himself. He was someone respected by people, who understood things most civilians didn't. Inside the house, the men settled in comfortably. They moved around like it was second nature, some taking seats, others standing near the windows, assessing the view out of habit. Noah made coffee, grateful to have people around him who made him feel grounded again. Cole leaned back on the sofa. You really didn't tell us all this? It didn't seem important, Noah said. Gray gave him a look. It's important if someone is making your life harder for no reason, Reed nodded. We're not here to fight anyone, but we are here to help. Noah appreciated that. He didn't want a confrontation. He didn't want drama. He simply wanted to live peacefully. But he also knew the situation wasn't going away, and having his friends around made him feel less alone outside. Neighbors whispered about the SUVs and the men who arrived so confidently. Some were impressed. Others were nervous. But all of them knew something had shifted that morning. The calm street now carried a quiet tension, a sense that something bigger was happening, even if no one understood exactly what. As for Lila, she was inside her house, pacing with her binder open on the kitchen table. She had already decided on her next steps. If the HOA rules didn't scare Noah before, she was determined to make sure they did now, but she had no idea who. She was dealing with how far this was going to go, and she definitely didn't know the kind of loyalty that followed a man like Noah, because once his unit arrived, they weren't leaving until they made sure he was safe, respected, and treated fairly. The neighborhood had no idea that this quiet morning was only the beginning. The morning after the meeting felt different in the neighborhood. It was quieter than usual, but not the peaceful kind of quiet Noah had grown used to. This quiet felt like everyone was waiting for something to happen, like they were holding their breath. People watered their lawns a little slower, checked their mailboxes a little later, stayed at their windows a little longer than normal. Noah woke up early, as he always did. Years of routine had shaped him, and even in a calm neighborhood, he couldn't sleep late. But this morning, something else pushed him awake. He knew the HOA board had seen the reports, heard the recordings, and listened to the witnesses who came forward on their own. He also knew they had scheduled a follow-up meeting not because they wanted to, but because the community insisted. He sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, listening to the slow hum of the refrigerator while the first light of the sun slipped through the window. His unit members were still asleep in the guest rooms and living room. They had insisted on staying one more night to make sure things settled. They didn't watch him like he was helpless. They just stayed nearby the same way they always did when one of them was dealing with something heavy. He appreciated it more than he said out loud. Soft knock on the front door pulled him from his thoughts. It was too early for visitors, and for a moment he hesitated. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find Mr. Reynolds, an older resident who usually kept to himself. His hands were in his pockets, and he looked almost nervous. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said quietly. "Not at all," Noah replied. Mr. Reynolds gave a small, grateful nod. "I just wanted to say, well, the neighborhood appreciates how calm you've been about all this. Some folks might have yelled or made a scene, but you handled it better than most of us ever could." Noah offered a gentle smile. "I'm not trying to create trouble. I just want to live peacefully." "We know," Mr. Reynolds said. "And that's why a lot of us spoke up yesterday. More people than you realize have been uncomfortable with Leela for a long time. They just didn't know how to stand up to her." Noah didn't say anything at first. He didn't like thinking of himself as someone other people looked to. Leadership in the field was one thing. Leading neighbors and families in a quiet suburb was different entirely. But he nodded slowly, grateful for the man's honesty. "Thank you," he said simply. Mr. Reynolds nodded again before stepping back. "The meeting today will be interesting. Just know that you're not alone in it." When the man walked away, Noah closed the door gently and exhaled. He didn't feel nervous, but he did feel a heavy sense of responsibility now. Not for the board meeting itself, but for the people who had spoken out because they saw what he went through. A soft voice behind him said, "Visitor." It was Gray, stretching his shoulders as he walked into the kitchen. "Just a neighbor." Noah replied. Gray poured himself some coffee. "You ready for today?" "As ready as I can be," Gray nodded. "We'll be here. In case you need us?" Noah appreciated the reassurance, but he didn't want the board to feel intimidated by the unit. He wanted fairness, not fear. So he told them all the same thing. They could stay at the house. But they didn't need to come into the meeting room with him. They didn't argue or insist. They trusted him enough to handle it alone by the time the meeting was scheduled to begin. Noah walked to the community center on foot. The small building sat near the playground and had big glass windows on all sides. Usually, meetings had maybe 5 or 6 people, most of them half interested in HOA discussions. But today, nearly 24 residents stood outside, waiting. Some waved at him gently, others nodded. A few stepped closer, but didn't know what to say. He thanked them quietly and stepped inside the building. The HOA board sat at a long table near the front. It was the first time he saw all 5 members together, and they looked more nervous than authoritative. Lila sat at the far right, hands folded tightly in front of her binder. She wouldn't look at anyone directly, especially not Noah. He took a seat in the front row. Everyone else filled in behind him. The meeting began with the board president clearing his throat. "We're here today to address several concerns brought forward by residents regarding the actions of certain HOA representatives." He didn't say Lila's name, but everyone's eyes slid toward her anyway. The president continued. "We've reviewed written statements, video clips, and recordings provided voluntarily by multiple neighbors. We have also spoken directly with involved parties. Based on the evidence," Leela stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "He brought military men into the neighborhood. He blocked the street." Leela, the president interrupted softly, "Please sit down. This is a safety concern," she insisted, clutching her binder like it somehow proved her point. Camo clothing, unfamiliar vehicles, men walking around like they're guarding something. It made people uncomfortable. It's disruptive, a voice from the back called out. No, you made people uncomfortable, another added. You've been picking on him since day one. Two more voices murmured agreement. Leela looked around in disbelief. She wasn't used to being questioned like this. Are you all serious? She snapped. I've been running this community smoothly for years. The board president gently tapped the table. Let's continue. Reluctantly, Lila sat. The president took a deep breath. As I was saying, we reviewed the evidence. It clearly shows that Noah did not violate any parking rules. His guests were not blocking the street, and the vehicles were parked legally. As for the clothing issue, there is no rule against wearing camouflage or any specific clothing style. It was never part of the HOA guidelines. Several people whispered, shocked that the board finally admitted it. The president turned to Leela. We also found that warnings and citations were issued without board approval and without proper review. Allah's face flushed with disbelief. I followed procedure? No, one board member said gently. You didn't. Another board member folded her hands. Several residents told us they felt intimidated by the way you conducted inspections and enforced rules. We can't ignore that. Isla glared at the room. So now you're choosing him over me? A man who hasn't even lived here long? A neighbor stood up. It's not about choosing. It's about fairness. Someone else spoke up. You crossed the line, Lila, third resident added. You bullied him. You bully all of us. The room grew heavy with honesty that had been held in for too long. Lila leaned back like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I did what I had to do to keep this place in order, the president sighed. Order doesn't come from fear. Silence filled the space. Finally, the president turned back to Noah. We want to formally apologize for the way you've been treated. You followed the rules, you stayed respectful, and you didn't deserve the stress caused by improper enforcement.
Ow.
Noah nodded once. Thank you, the president continued. We plan to revise our procedures. From now on, no single person will have the authority to issue citations without board approval. And we will also review the HOA guidelines to ensure they are clear and fair. A few neighbors clapped softly, then one board member added, we also need to decide how to move forward with Lila's role. The room went quiet again. Lila stared at the board, eyes wide. You can't be serious. But they were. The board president folded his hands. Given the number of complaints and the evidence of improper conduct, we are removing you from your position as head of property compliance.